Hello and welcome to the Latino Business Journey podcast presented by the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Michael Puente. You know, banking can be a little intimidating, especially for Latinos and Latinos looking to get into business. Our next guest specializes in getting Latino-owned businesses access to capital and providing them the guidance to grow their business. Letticia Flores Poole is Senior Regional Manager with the Zero Barriers to Business program with BMO. And so welcome to the program, Letty.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Well, tell us, first of all, how did you get into this sort of specialized program, the Zero Barriers to Business program?
Yes, so I've been in banking 25 years. The majority of my career has always been in communities. So small business, community, working to really help bring financial education to the communities, especially our people of color. So as I continued my journey with BMO Bank, 3 years ago, this program started, which was specializing at that time and targeted just for our Black and Latino-owned businesses. And it was because we seen a need and we wanted to fill this need. And I know there was a need for our Latino businesses, access to capital and education and resources.
So somebody has an idea, they may be an expert in whatever, building, construction, translating, but then making that into a business and finding out, well, how am I going to fund this? That's where you come in?
Yes. So there's a few areas where I come in. So the access to capital actually is for businesses that have been involved with their business at least 2 years or better. But our education and our resources are for startup, all stage businesses, right? Because what we found is that a lot of the times the businesses have this idea in their head, right? This baby that they want to give birth to, but they need the guidance as far as a plan. What is the plan? How do I get to certain funding? How do I get to really build a relationship where I can have viable resources to help my business grow and scale? So that's, yes, where I come in to help.
What are some of the more like basic questions that you're asked when they come to this program? What are they looking for?
So primarily, honestly speaking, they're looking for capital. They're looking for money, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes I ask them that we have to take some steps back and get them prepared. So I give them some homework because what they don't know is my personal credit needs to be in order before I can get business credit. Well, why? This is business. My business has its own identity. It has its own entity. Why is my personal credit important, right? So that's one thing that I teach a lot is the character of your business is your credit, personally. The other one is their numbers. They don't know their numbers, right? They just have no clue. Like, I need this dollar amount, I believe, to get this project done. But they have no knowledge of what are their revenue, what is their net income. So I spend a lot of time helping teach them to know their numbers just as well as they know that business.
What happens when somebody doesn't have much of a credit background to lean on? Personal credit.
So another part of our program, and I don't want to make a program specific, but I'm going to make a Latino business specific, but is partnerships. So we partner with partners like the Illinois Hispanic Chamber. We partner with different organizations that help complement and give these businesses what they need. And also at BMO Bank, we give them credit building solutions. So as a business owner, your personal wellness, your financial wellness is important. Right? So we try to help them build that credit if they don't have the credit yet.
So you told me not to call you Letticia because you feel like you might be in trouble. So we're going to call you Letty.
Yes.
Letty, let's turn the clock back a little bit. Before this program, you've been in the banking industry now for 25 years?
Yes, sir.
How did you start that? What was your background before?
Oh, wow. So I started, I grew up in Little Village, La Villita, as we say. And I grew up there working in retail stores. So I had the ability to look at the community and help with them making possibly, I guess I'd say, fashion choices. But I was working in a retail store, and I had the privilege of being able to become a manager in the store and really get the knowledge that behind how businesses run, right? Like what it takes to get businesses running. And it began to intrigue me, the financial aspect of it, right? How they do their books and how banks work. And I went out on a limb and I applied for a bank job with no banking experience. But I really wanted to be able to use kind of what I already knew as far as being in a community, seeing individuals needing just more knowledge or more resource. And I felt that I could possibly be that one to help influence that change or add, even if I'm just teaching one person something. And I applied for a bank role, which is retail management experience. And fortunately, they gave me that opportunity, and I've continued to grow my career since then.
And do you find that some of the barriers to the community centers around either language or cultural, just a misunderstanding?
Yeah, so I get really passionate about the cultural awareness and how those cultural competencies help and hold us back, right? A lot of times in our Latino communities, what we don't know really does hurt us, right? So it's the education and the resources, and also it's trust. A big factor is trust. You may have one family member that says, well, I did this way, or don't do this. And maybe their advice is coming from their heart, but it's not really coming from their head in the sense of, is it a real sound advice to say, well, no, banks can't help you, or they don't have the resources for us, or I'm a Latina and I don't have the right possible documentation. So it's fear, it's lack of knowledge, which then imposes trust issues, and then will hold us back from really looking to see what is out there for us. What kind of resources? How do we connect and collaborate versus be in competition with each other?
So you talk about fear. I guess a lot of people have fear going to the dentist, but then going to the bank. What perpetuates that fear? And how do you break down that fear, especially for Latino immigrants who are maybe really intimidated by the process?
Well, I think one of the pieces that you mentioned, Michael, was language, right? So I think part of the fear is language, that they feel that they're going to come into a bank and possibly not see somebody that looks like them or that can even understand them. So something that I've seen evolve over time, over the time that I've been in banking, just to go back a little bit more as we're going back. When I started my banking career, I was probably one of the only Latinas in my bank at that time, right? I was surrounded by majority male Caucasian, right? So when I think of that for my clients, when I think of that for my Latino clients coming into a bank, well, that was already the first part of fear, that intimidation. How am I going to talk to them? How are they going to understand me? So that's fear right there. And now I'm putting up my wall. Now I don't trust you, because if I can't speak to you and if I don't think you're going to understand me, well, how am I going to trust you to give me some financial advice? So over time, I know for BMO, I know for me, has been very important for me to help make sure that when I'm working in a bank location, I have individuals that look like the community. And that's something that's changed over time to allow businesses to feel they can come in the door and speak to somebody that's going to truly want to listen to them and give them some sound advice, and hopefully in the language that's comfortable for them.
So you came from a retail background to banking. Was there a sort of a portion of getting adjusted to your new industry? Did you have to overcome some fear and almost grow their trust in you?
Well, yes, because, I came with knowledge as far as management, right? So I had that management, but I needed to learn the theory of banking. I needed to learn the ins and outs. And I've always been familiar and comfortable with being that go-to person within my industry, within my career, my job. So I had to really ask questions. I had to get curious. I had to know that, again, one part of my fear and my intimidation was that, well, here I am, this young Latina with not a lot of banking experience in this bank, that people might be judging me, right? They might look at me like, what is she here for? Is she going to add value? Can we trust her to do her job?
Mm-hmm. And over the years, you managed to do that.
Over the years, I was able to. My first bank job, we went through a federal audit. So that's where I really embraced the operations piece, the compliance and risk and all that. I was like, ooh, wow, right? A little different than a retail store. So I had to learn that piece. I always know how to sell. Right? I always say that, right? I'm in a retail store. So, I say that that's something easy for me to connect with individuals, connect with people, kind of get to know them, and then help influence the team that I helped run, right? How do I help them be able to connect and be able to add value to the customers we were talking to that we knew needed more advice, right?
So the Barriers to Business program, Zero Barriers to Business program, how was that developed?
So it started November of 2020. So right after the civil unrest, the midst of the pandemic, the research had already gone in. So some fun facts when we think of Latino businesses and just minority businesses in general. The reason why this program started is because 42% of minority businesses report having difficulty accessing capital versus 29% of non-minority. And these businesses are growing at a 19% rate, faster than our non-minority businesses. So what is this telling us? Our minority businesses are growing faster and they can't get capital. So the research behind it allowed us to do what we call a special purpose credit program, which that's what Zero Barriers is. It's a program where we've expanded our credit criteria to allow us to get more dollars into the hands of these business owners.
What's your advice to like somebody who has an idea, who's an entrepreneur, has this great product or service? What's the first step they have to do to get that business up and running and into reality?
I tell them have a business plan. I'm working now on trying to get my business plan template translated into Spanish so I can help more businesses understand how to get this plan done. But it's a plan. If you don't have a business plan, then you have a hobby. If you're truly really wanting to make this business your bread and butter, how you eat, and you want to grow this business, scale it to become, $1 million businesses and revenues, you have to start with a solid business plan. And that's really where that's your business's roadmap. It's going to force you to do some research in this industry, and it's going to force you to kind of really check different things that's going to allow you to be able to come to the bank and ask for a loan. It's going to ask you to be able to work with different individuals like chambers, small business development centers, working with SBA, all of that as you want to grow and scale your business. Typically, one of the first questions they ask you is, do you have a business plan?
Business plan is very important.
Very important. That's where you got to start.
How you talked a little bit about, so your program started in 2020?
Yes.
So then soon after the pandemic hit and everything shut down, we're reemerging. How has your line of work changed because of the pandemic?
Well, so the good news story about that was that we were still able to help many clients be able to pivot, as we say, right? So businesses that had a plan had to kind of pivot, and businesses that didn't have a plan had to say, okay, this is how I'm working my business. Now I'm in the midst of this pandemic. How do we help businesses look at alternative solutions, different ways how to do business? So I had to take some time to really kind of get better versed with online. All right. So how my role changed, I'm really big with boots on the ground, getting out in the community, going to businesses. Well, you couldn't go into businesses, right? Businesses didn't have their doors open. So how did you help them think outside the box, still be compliant with what the rules were, but still help them still make money, right? Because a lot of these businesses, we know that, right? This is how they feed their family. This is how many families support. Many other families were depending on them. So for us, in my role, we had to really think outside the box. Well, how can we keep this business doors open? How can we keep this business viable, right? What are ways? And we were still able to deploy capital within that time. We've done, our last report shows that we did about $100 million in loans to over 4,000 clients. And now that's not just in Chicagoland, right? We have a nice portion because that's where our program started. Fun fact to go back, our Zero Barriers program started in Illinois and Northwest Indiana. Wow. We expanded a year later into our other footprint and now even more. But we had to really look at what was happening in Chicago, in Illinois, and how do we help these banks? How do we help them pivot to like e-commerce businesses? How do you help them get online? How do you help them with marketing and branding, right? So joining forces with different partners like the Chamber and others to really help bring that knowledge. Certain businesses were like, well, I was just a sit-in business, like a restaurant, right? They came in and sat. I didn't do takeout. Well, now these businesses had to pivot to takeout, right? They had to get other services. One thing that I know in our Latino communities that I continue to help try to tell our businesses, there's a cost to do business, right? Some of our businesses didn't accept credit cards. It was cash only because that's what they know, right? They didn't want to pay services to do these other services like Uber Eats and DoorDash. can I trust them? Can I pay?
It's all digital.
It was all digital. So we had to really help instill confidence and knowledge to some of these businesses to trust the process. And then part of it was just teaching them to be more savvy online and use tools that they never have had to use before. So a lot of it was teaching, educating, and doing research myself just to really see how I can help this business.
How enjoyable is it for you to have a career that takes into account your retail background, your banking background, but your heritage, your language skills, the connecting with people? You're able to utilize who you are to help other people in this profession.
Yeah, when you say that, it just makes my heart smile, right? So, as a Cubana Latina growing up in Little Village, I've seen these businesses with their grit and their sweat having to really try to make their business. And I can look back at multiple businesses and see how they've just flourished and grown, right? And now to look that I can use my voice to be part of that change, I'm extremely proud of it, right? When I look back at some retail businesses that have grown, right? If I've had my hand in advice or connecting them with somebody. So I always say that now is my time that I can give back to the communities, not only just the little villages of the neighborhood, but other communities that are surrounded with, our Black and brown businesses.
Is there anything you'd like to add? Something I didn't ask, something that you want to share?
Well, something that I was talking, and when we think of like the history of businesses and the different communities, what I wanted to kind of focus on, and this could probably take us into other conversations, when we think of Little Village specifically and the culture that community was thought of, and at times still thought of, as a community that's not very vibrant, that doesn't have a lot of businesses worth visiting and talking about. There's 1,000 businesses in that community. 500 of them are from probably 26th in California and spans to maybe 26 in Costner, just within that couple mile radius. About 500 businesses exist there. And a fun fact on that community, we need an update on the statistic, but at one point it was deemed that it was the second largest revenue generating community, next to the Magnificent Mile. So to put that in perspective, Magnificent Mile, Little Village. How is that community able to generate that much money on our on our books compared? And showing the vibrancy of that community. That's why I love to kind of highlight them and bring back any resources and awareness and visibility to that community, because even though maybe it's not thought of that the dollars do try to stay within that community, it is something that I feel does happen, and they are making some great money with the businesses that have been there for 30, 40 plus, that there's a few that are still survived and continue to grow.
I could see you're passionate about it.
Just a little bit.
You're almost tearing out just talking about it.
I get it. It hits my heart because I look at some of them and I've seen their journey. Mm-hmm. And for me to be able to kind of go back there and, talk to businesses and host banking hours and talk to them, it makes me very proud that I can use my voice.
Well, Letticia Flores Poole is Senior Regional Manager with the Zero to Barriers Business Program with BMO. Thank you so much for being here on the Latino Business Journey podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And today's program was, of course, presented by the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm Michael Puente. Thank you for listening and or watching. Have a great day.